We are in 2049, and the setting is somewhat desolate. Augustine, an experienced scientist, finds himself isolated in an observatory located in the icy Arctic Circle, immersed in solitude while savoring what could be one of his last meals. A mental journey takes him back 3 weeks earlier, when a calamitous situation triggered the urgent evacuation of the location. A global catastrophe, the details of which remain a mystery, has devastated almost the entire population of the planet. The event has left Earth in a deplorable state, bathed in ionizing radiation that continues to spread slowly across its surface. During that chaotic time, while everyone rushed to escape the imminent danger, Augustine decided to stay. Suffering from a terminal illness, he calculated that his life was already hanging by a thread. Authorities tried to warn him about the severity of his condition, reminding him that without the necessary blood transfusions, he would not survive more than a week. Amid the evacuation turmoil, the cries of a woman searching for her lost daughter pierced the air. A friend tried to calm her down, assuring her that she had seen the girl board one of the rescue helicopters. With the place finally empty, Augustine resigned himself to spending his final days in the company of only his palliative care routine, medications, brief naps, and contemplations of the starry sky. Meanwhile, Augustine's mind drifts again, this time to a more hopeful period of his life. He is seen as an enthusiastic young man, sharing his discoveries about K23, a previously unknown moon of Jupiter, at a conference. He describes its almost ideal characteristics for life. After his lecture, he is approached by Jean, a charming young woman. The mutual interest is evident, and soon they are immersed in innocent flirting. During a casual encounter, Jean questions Augustine about how feasible his theories about Jupiter's moon are, catching him off guard with the direct question. Back in the present, Augustine, now alone and with limited resources, checks the status of space missions and discovers that all have been ceased, except for the Ether, a manned mission returning from an exploration of Jupiter's moon. He feels a special connection with Sullivan, one of the astronauts aboard. In space, Sully, as she is known, wakes up and interacts with her crew members as they face the unsettling silence of cut-off communications with Earth. They are puzzled by the lack of response from ground stations. Back at the observatory, while Augustine prepares his dinner, he notices a half-eaten bowl on the table. For a brief moment, he suspects the presence of someone else, but soon concludes that it must have been him who left the bowl there. Augustine is focused on his work when a loud fire alarm suddenly breaks the stillness of the Arctic observatory. He runs to the kitchen, finding a small fire, which he quickly extinguishes with a fire extinguisher. Exhausted, he lets himself collapse onto the cold kitchen floor, and to his surprise, discovers a little girl hiding under the table. Trying to stay calm, Augustine grabs the radio and desperately attempts to contact the authorities, but all his efforts are in vain. He tells the girl that someone will come for her soon, though deep down he feels that he may be the least suitable person to help, given his health condition. Worried about calming the girl, who seems terrified, Augustine prepares dinner for her. During the meal, he tries to make conversation, asking about her family, but she remains silent. Concluding that perhaps she cannot speak, he encourages her to communicate however she can. She then draws an iris, revealing her name. Moments later, the opportunity to contact the Ether arises again, and Augustine rushes to try to establish communication, but frustrated, he realizes that the signal is still insufficient. He explains to Iris that Jupiter's moon was supposed to be humanity's new home, and that he needs to inform the crew about the Earth's catastrophe before they return to a doomed planet. At night, despite Augustine's objections, Iris insists on sleeping in his room, seeking comfort. Augustine spends his time working on the antenna, discovering in frustration that its power is insufficient to reach the Ether. During dinner, Iris plays with her food, and he, finally surrendering to the situation, just watches and smiles. Aboard the Ether, the captain logs concerns in his ship's journal. With no contact from any Earth station, the crew operates under the assumption that the communication problem is internal. He also celebrates the mission's success. K23 is definitely habitable. Back on Earth, Augustine undergoes another one of his necessary blood transfusions when Iris joins him. He takes the moment to teach her about the North Star, distracting her from the grave situation for a moment. A flashback interrupts, revealing an intimate moment from the past. Jean visits Augustine at work to tell him she is not pregnant, a false alarm. Even in the face of this news, he cannot pull away from his studies and does not look at her, leaving her hurt and understanding that while Augustine seeks to discover new worlds, he neglects his own world here and now. Finally, Augustine discovers that the ionizing radiation is advancing faster than expected and is reaching the observatory. Knowing he must act quickly, he learns of another facility further north, a weather station with an antenna powerful enough to finally reach the ether. Determined, he prepares for what could be his last journey. Augustine faces an enormous challenge, but he knows it is the only way to establish contact with the ether and ensure Iris's rescue. He meticulously organizes his transfusion machine and other essential items, while outfitting himself and little Iris with protective clothing against the hostile environment. With everything ready, they set off together, venturing into the frozen wilderness. On the spaceship, Ether, meanwhile, crew member Maya immerses herself in a holographic experience that resurrects memories of long-lost friends, with Sanchez watching beside her, intrigued. She shares details with him about the people who populate her memories. Elsewhere on the ship, Mitchell finds himself absorbed in a romantic movie, the longing for his wife tightening his heart. Sully and Aide pass the time playing cards, a welcome break, until a piercing alarm suddenly cuts through the air, signaling a critical navigation problem that has thrown the ship off its planned course. The crew quickly mobilizes to chart a new path back to Earth, one that passes through unknown regions of space. With no communication with Earth, Aide emphasizes the lack of alternatives, but to keep moving forward. On Earth, Augustine and Iris's journey leads them to a grim discovery, the wreckage of a crashed plane. Augustine searches inside and finds a man who has survived but is gravely injured. The man's desperate plea for an end to his suffering forces Augustine into a devastating decision. He ends the man's life to spare him further pain, a choice that leaves him deeply shaken. They set up a temporary camp so Augustine can continue his necessary transfusions. A flashback takes Augustine to an encounter with Jean, now a mother to a young girl. He asks if Jean has told the child about him, her father. She replies that the decision to reveal his identity is his to make. Augustine remains silent, unable to respond, and Jean walks away with the girl. Back on the ether, a personal revelation comes to light. Sully is pregnant, and Aide, the father, shares in her joy and anticipation. On Earth, as Augustine and Iris navigate through a snowstorm, Iris points to distant shapes that turn out to be campsites. Augustine decides to stop for the night. During the night, he encourages Iris to share something about herself. Focused on drawing the face of a woman, Iris makes Augustine recall a woman he once knew, full of life and with an enchanting laugh. Iris, curious, looks up from her drawing and asks if he loved her. However, this conversation is revealed to be part of Augustine's painful dream, and he wakes to find the camp being swallowed by freezing waters as the ice beneath them cracks. Augustine, gripped by panic as he sees the ice breaking under his feet, reacts swiftly. He grabs Iris, pulling her away from the imminent danger. Then he rushes back to rescue his transfusion machine, something vital for keeping himself alive. However, as he struggles to regain control of the situation, the ice gives way entirely, and he plunges into the frigid Arctic waters along with the snowmobile. Submerged and panicked, he watches as his machine sinks quickly into the icy depths, far beyond his reach. Battling hypothermia, Augustine manages to swim back to the surface, narrowly escaping death by freezing. Yet as he emerges from the freezing water, the harsh reality sets in. He has lost his only source of survival, and now his days are irreversibly numbered. Even with his health deteriorating and without the machine, Augustine and Iris continue on foot, facing the harsh weather and the constant threat of the wild. The journey becomes even more perilous when they are caught in a snowstorm, surrounded by a pack of wolves. In a desperate act, Augustine fires his weapon to scare the animals away. However, in the chaos of the situation, he loses sight of Iris. The snowstorm intensifies, making any attempt to find her difficult. Exhausted and shaken, he falls to his knees, feeling the weight of the situation. When the storm finally subsides, Iris finds him, and the two embrace tightly, relieved to be together again. After another long stretch of walking, battling exhaustion and cold, they finally reach the weather station. Using the powerful antenna at the facility, Augustine is finally able to make contact with the ether spacecraft. Sully, upon hearing his voice, becomes incredibly emotional. She questions why no one on Earth had tried to contact them all this time. Augustine begins to explain the global catastrophe that devastated the planet. But before he can finish, the ether enters a dangerous, unknown region, an asteroid field. The impact severely damages the ship's radar and communication systems, cutting off the conversation. After leaving the asteroid field, the ether's crew realizes that urgent repairs need to be done outside the ship. Mitchell assesses the situation and concludes that they will have to perform a spacewalk to fix the damage. Sully and Maya volunteer for the task, but since Maya has no experience with spacewalks and Sully is pregnant, Aide decides to accompany them, supervising the procedure. The three astronauts leave the ship and begin the repairs while Sanchez plays music to keep their spirits up during the process. Everything seems to be going well until, at the end of the repair, a new asteroid field suddenly appears, shaking the ship violently. The astronauts cling desperately, struggling not to be thrown into space, but they manage to survive the ordeal. As they finally begin to return to the interior of the ship, Maya notices something alarming: drops of blood floating inside her suit. Aide realizes she has suffered a puncture wound and is losing oxygen rapidly. In a race against time, he rushes her back inside the ship while Sanchez prepares the decompression chamber with the medical kit, determined to save his colleague. The decompression process takes too long, and when they finally remove her helmet, a large amount of blood floats in the air, revealing that Maya had lost too much blood to survive. Despite Sanchez's desperate attempts, she doesn't make it. The crew feels the weight of this loss. Shortly afterward, the ether receives a 10-day-old message from Earth. It is from Beth, Mitchell's wife, with anguished eyes, saying that their children are sick and that everyone is being evacuated. Mitchell, deeply moved upon seeing her, feels the weight of the situation. With a broken heart, he goes to Aide and suggests that Sully and he take the ship back to K-23 to start a new life. However, Mitchell plans to descend to Earth in a landing module to search for his wife and children. Emotional, Sanchez decides to accompany him, saying he wants to take Maya's body back to Earth to bury her. He reveals that he had a daughter who died at a very young age, who would be the same age as Maya today. That's why he always saw her as a daughter. As Mitchell and Sanchez prepare to head to Earth, Sully contacts Augustine, thanking him for everything, especially for discovering K-23. She says that he is the reason she became a scientist, mentioning that Augustine had worked with her mother, Jean Sullivan. She also shares that he once gave her a moon rock when she was a child, and at that moment, Augustine realizes that Sully is his daughter. She calls him Dr. Lofthouse, but he asks her to call him Augustine. Sully then reveals that her first name is Iris. Augustine, with a gentle voice, replies that he already knew, revealing that the little girl who accompanied him during his journey was, in fact, a hallucination of the daughter he never truly met. In the end, Augustine asks Iris to describe what K-23 is like, and as she speaks about the planet, Augustine mentally transports himself there, imagining himself with his daughter. Finally, the radio signal is lost, leaving Sully and Aide alone, ready to begin the long journey back to Jupiter's moon to restart humanity. If you like this movie, then I recommend watching this one here as well. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. See you there.